into.
Yeah, I mean, as with so much, like we talk about technology a lot in this industry, and there are many good uses of it. There's many, I would say, overuses of it. And that's kind of the ongoing negotiation that we have in our industry, which is, we're a people centric industry. We're all about connecting people. We translate words and help people connect across language, across cultures, and all of that stuff. But we need to also be taking advantage of the latest technology trends. And like the ongoing negotiation, whether it's about supply chain, we're going to get to technology here soon, but the ongoing negotiation is always this, where do you draw that line between, um, you know,
Mhm.
and that's super important when you're putting together your supply chain because you need to know what type of supply chain you're putting together and what type of technology enablement you're going to have there. So walk us through our reality check. So supply chain reality check. Is the supply chain robust and reliable?
So are there effective communication channels with suppliers? Is there a mechanism to monitor and evaluate supplier performance? Does the supply chain support continuous improvement initiatives? Are we running automated quality checks before or after the translation stage? Are the mechanisms for feedback and collaboration between stakeholders to address any issues or challenges that may arise during the supply chain process? Is there a system in place to monitor and track the progress of content and for real-time visibility and timely intervention? Are contingency plans and alternative vendor options in place to mitigate risks and ensure continuity in unforeseen circumstances? And this is a really important point here too, because sometimes we tend to rely too much on one specific, part of
Yeah,
that supply chain, and we don't think about,
I,
having, yes, any kind of, yeah,
yeah,
contingency
I
plan.
know the point of the spectrum is to provide a framework to discuss and have these conversations as we were just talking about. It's not necessarily to make recommendations and tell people how they should be doing anything. But to your point, how do you feel about single sourcing vendors versus having multiple vendors? Like, where do you draw the line there? Because I remember, back in the day, I remember there was this big push towards single sourcing, having one vendor to do everything. And I think some companies kind of out there because it creates risk there. And they
Mhm.
didn't have those alternative vendor options out there. So, what would you say about that?
It's like we were saying before, it's like there's no one size fits all approach for any of these components. So I think that the idea behind this is like um, taking the time to analyze all the seven components carefully and see what works best for you and your partner. Uh,
Right.
to make sure that you're tackling or addressing all these components, since they are so interconnected and so interrelated, that you are making sure to
You're
work.
creating something that works for you, right? You're not just creating something where I've seen localization programs, quality programs, and just localization programs in general, where I've seen them fail, like big time,
Mhm,
is when you're trying to recreate something, you're trying to copy another organization, you're trying to copy another company. Like you used to work at, and I'm making this up, I am not thinking of anyone specifically out there, but it's like you used to work at Microsoft and then you go to Facebook and you're like, well, here's how we did it at Microsoft, so here's how we're going to do it at Facebook, and you start making all of these changes. And the reality is, like, what works at Microsoft might not work at Facebook. You might have to come up with something new, and that's why I love these reality check points in here because I think if you download this deck, and I'll post it, like I said, on Nimsy's LinkedIn page as a downloadable PDF. If you download this deck and you ask yourself and your team these questions and you just go through here really quickly, and it kind of tells you, like, here's where you need to be going before you start
mhm,
designing a quality program. And then you might not be able to answer all these questions. You might need to pull in your supply chain, pull in your vendors to it, or, shameless plug for NIMSY, we help people create, define their localization program roadmaps all of the time, including language quality programs. So you might want to bring in an external consultant. You might want to talk to your vendors. There's all sorts of different associations. You might want to leverage your professional network. All sorts of different options out there.
But if you allow me, I think that there's a question, and I remember that you mentioned this in another live session. I cannot remember who was the guest, but the question of what's good enough when talking about quality. I think
Right.
that's it's their question to answer. So, and that allows you to make sure that you are adjusting all these different possibilities and components to to answering that question. So what's good enough according to that specific project, that specific product, to that specific service. So, and for that, and here is when it comes, the user experience, in the sense that who can help you answer that question? Well, the user.
Nice segue into the next component here, Yanni.
Yes, because I can see in my mind. Hopefully you can also see that too.
See how it's going. Yeah, the thought process here.
Yeah. So what's good enough? Well, ask your the consumer, your client, your so that's the idea. Because I think it also has to do, and again, it leads me to the first component to this, considering the experiential quality model as a holistic model, right? So there's an undeniable tendency towards that, I think.
So we're talking about, and for those following along at home, we're talking about user experience, the next component here, and how to optimize the UX. You say involving the target audience in the testing process. How do you do that? What are some of the ways that you've seen organizations involve the audience in the testing process? Because it's going to look different for every program. It's going to look different for because every company has different customers, and if you're B2B, business to business organization, that is going to look very different from if you're B2C, business to consumer. So just at a high level, what are some of the things people can start doing today to include their target audience into the localization testing process?
Perhaps the easiest way to do that is through surveys. You can also have internal surveys, even if you are an LSP and want to, for even, I'm thinking out loud here, but QBRs sometimes are a way of,
Yeah.
I think that it's a way of measure, that satisfaction out there. So, and I think that that's a way to do that. And of course, again, it depends on the product you have in place or the different challenges, but at least to consider listening.
It is fancy. This is what I tell people. It's like you can spend as much money as you want on this. And, if you have money that you want to spend on this, give us a call, because we do a lot of this work here at NIMSY. As you well know, Yanni, you're leading a
Yes.
lot of that work. And you want to convene 10 person in country focus groups where you sit, have a UX researcher sit with them for 4 hours and talk about it. You can do that. Is it going to cost you a lot of money? Yes, it is, right? So, but there's a middle area in that. You don't have to go all the way to that. There's some very practical things that you can start doing today, usually at very little investment, either with budget or time. There's some things that you can start doing today to start including the voice of your customer in there. And we don't need to get into that too much today.
No, but I mean, just to prove your point, yes, we even conducted many studies, UX studies, which are perhaps, it sounds like simple, like creating a survey, but the thing is what we do with those results. And that's the most interesting thing to do, is how we analyze that information, how we create insights about that. So it's not just about what the customers say
Yeah.
but how to interpret that information.
And that's where I would say, I mean, perhaps a self-serving statement, but I would say be cautious of relying upon your existing supply chain to do this type of work, your more traditional LSPs, because those traditional LSPs are, they're going to be hyper focused, as they perhaps should be, hyper focused on traditional LSPs are going to be focused on traditional language quality metrics. And the whole point of trying to incorporate the user experience into the localization quality processes and ideas out there is to start thinking outside the box and really start shifting the way that we're doing things. So be careful about just relying upon your existing supply chains, I would say, for UX research out there. Likewise, be careful about relying upon traditional user experience companies to measure multicultural, multilingual user experience if you're looking for metrics that are specifically speaking to the quality of the localization. So that's all I'm going to say about that. User experience reality check. I'll give you a break, Yanni, and I'll read through this one. So, does the company deeply understand the target audience's expectations and preferences? And I'll add to that, those expectations and preferences are different for every market. They can be very different. Next, are user experience considerations integrated into the localization process from the outset? Is the localized content tested and validated for user experience? Are localization efforts tailored to the cultural and linguistic expectations of the target audience? That's the big one. That's one that a lot of traditional UX shops, agencies, perhaps don't understand. And lastly, does the company actively seek an user experience? Right. So that's your reality check, which takes us into the next section here, metrics.
Yeah,
How are we
metrics.
how are we doing here? So we've got just a quick recap. We're going through the 7 components of the NIMSI LQM spectrum. We've talked about quality models, vendor management, supply chain, user experience, and now we're in the home stretch. We're going to talk about metrics, technology, and finance. So how do metrics, how are they involved in a language quality program? I would say.
Yes, we talk about data, collecting data, for instance, through UX studies. And of course, the idea behind collecting that data is to have, like a solid visualization of where you're standing. The idea is that you can perhaps want to have some, you may want to evaluate or have you make some progress in if you implement some changes in your program. So the idea is if you're collecting information, data, metrics, make sure that you're using those metrics. Otherwise, you're just collecting data, and if you're not doing anything with that information, then it's just like a waste of time. And we know that wasting time is like wasting money.
Yeah,
So
it's pretty much common sense, but it still needs to be saying. I think I was last week I was giving a workshop on quality. I was giving a workshop on quality program components, I think. And I was talking about metrics, and like what I say all the time is do not use what I call vanity metrics, which is like I want to have 20 different reports in my dashboard because it makes me feel smart. Only track and only report data that's going to help you or your clients or your customers make better business. Analyzing it, once a month, once a quarter, whatever, is it going to help me make better business decision? And if the answer is no, then don't track it.
yeah,
I would say.
absolutely. Yes, that's the idea behind having metrics is to make better informed decisions. After all, so yeah, it's all about that. So do you want me to read this?
Yeah, you take a turn
Okay.
here. So metrics reality check from Yanni, everybody. Go for it.
Okay. Are the metrics comprehensive enough to capture all relevant aspects of language quality? Are the metrics aligned with the company's language quality objectives? Are the metrics reliable and consistent in measuring language quality? Do the metrics provide actionable insights for improving language quality? Are the metrics regularly reviewed and updated to reflect evolving quality requirements? And I think this is really important. So
Yeah.
I think I included something about, it's like having a compass. So you can, in your localization or in your quality management journey, you have like metrics which can guide you where you want to go. But from time to time, perhaps you need to look around and make sure that you are using that compass
Yeah.
efficiently,
You see
So,
a
yeah.
lot of these like legacy metrics, legacy processes, even where it's like a company's tracking and reporting something. Why? Because that's the way it's always been done, right?
Absolutely. Yeah,
And
that's what I mean.
you could
So
make an
sometimes,
argument that like traditional LQA metrics. Now I'm going to be careful what I say about LQA because I'm not anti LQA. People think I'm anti language quality assurance, like traditional scorecard based LQA models. I'm not. I just think that in 2023 and beyond, they're not sufficient by themselves, right?
mhm,
Which leads us into what we're talking about here, essentially. But let's move on to the technology.
technology.
Thoughtful integration of technology and human involvement.
Yeah, basically it's about that. It's like finding the balance between,
Yep.
automation technology and human reviewers, in the sense that, of course, there are pros and cons. So again, you may want to find what's the balance for you specifically, because we can talk a lot about ideal scenarios,
Mm-hmm.
of course, but it all comes down to what you have available regarding technology, about, also from the human side of things too. So I think we have to be careful about that too, because sometimes you don't have the possibility to integrate or variables that we need